Jews are not proselytizers. We don't seek for people to convert to Judaism, but this is very paradoxical. Because if it's supposed that Jews have this role of spreading Hashem's name throughout the world, how are we going to do it if we're not proselytizers? And the second question, let's say a person who is not Jewish becomes convinced that the Torah is true. Can he be a proselytizer? That is, he can start spreading it in a way that the Jew does not. All these questions are very mysterious but critical, because our generation is the one where these platforms are finally allowing us to expand the message that Israel had encapsulated for millennia. And I have a guest who I believe is the greatest expert on the subject in Latin America, which is about the topic of the Noahide laws. And it's Rabbi Ariel Groisman, who, for those who don't know, is one of the rabbis at the El Paso Temple. He is the director of Noahide Study Centers, and I'll leave all the links in the description of this video so you can access their social media. And you can also get in touch with Rabbi Groisman, anyone who wants to. And Rabbi, welcome to our page.
Shalom, shalom. Thank you very much, dear Jacob. And to everyone watching this video on Jewish Philosophy, the channel.
How do you explain that tension? I mean, we are not proselytizers. I think most people are clear about that. If someone has tried to convert or knows that it's not that easy, but then how is that role fulfilled? And then I would like it if you could also come in and help explain whether a non-Jew in the Jewish system, that is a non-Noahide, can be a proselytizer. Of course,
actually, spreading Noahide ideas is the opposite of proselytism. If by proselytism we mean convincing followers to attract them to our ideology, which can be religious, political, or of any kind, it's actually the opposite, because spreading the Noahide ideas of the monotheistic system. The universal aspect of the Torah is based solely on explaining and presenting the foundations, ideas, and practices that the Torah has for all human beings. And forming a divine covenant just with that, and trusting in the content, that the content will be everything else. Just as Abraham did. Abraham discovered monotheism on his own 3,700 years ago, as Maimonides narrates in the Laws Against Idolatry, in his first volume, where he himself observed nature and asked questions and came to conclusions. And those conclusions, those observations, he shared with his peers. And here is where the wonder happens. Just like with coins, ideas work the same way. The genuine and authentic coin displaces the fake coin, and authentic ideas displace erroneous ideas. And that's how idolatry is classified in the Torah as a great error. And the great truth displaces the great error. Consequently, sharing, spreading, making it enjoyable and accessible, in facilitating this content to people, it's the opposite of wanting to convince them or bring them to the Miradin. It's the exact opposite. We provide tools so that the person can reflect, observe, and if he wants, take what he wants when he wants. And he begins to discover ideas, questions, aspects of nature, of life, of his connection, of his meaning in life that he didn't know until now. That is to say, there is no proselytism. Yes, there is dissemination and communication of ideas, which is something different, and we trust that the ideas will do the rest. Very interesting.
RAV, that is, it's almost like there's a dialectic of we are convinced that the idea is correct, and that's why there's no need to push it or to try to use tricks. Like what can happen in political or religious parties where they try to sell you an idea. Yes, I think that's correct, because Judaism really puts everything on the table and try and see. That is RAV.
From the assortment of beliefs, because there really are 1,000 beliefs, each one says, mine is the true one. And I want to convince you, standing on a tripod and indicating that position, it must be completely uprooted. On the contrary, respecting each human being, their free conscience and choice, trusting that they will discover what we propose in some way, and that they themselves will have the experience of discovering, that they investigate, that they open doors and open up to questions. More than giving answers to their questions, we have to give them questions and invite them to observe. That's more than enough.
And this connects for the audience. Do you know how a Jew answers a question with another question? Even when we Jews talk, sometimes we have questioning tones. But I want to summarize for the audience that source that Rav Groisman mentioned about Maimonides, which says that Abraham came to the knowledge of monotheism through reasoning. He thought, let's see, could it be the sun? But the sun hides, right? So could it be the moon? Could it be fire? Fire goes out. An intellectual process led him to conclude there's a reason behind every reason. And that's why the idea will eventually triumph when all the others fall. My next question is, Rav, a person who is not Jewish, does he have this ability? So aside from being in the same process that the Torah itself respects for every human being, does he have, let's say, permission or prohibition to be a proselytizer? In what sense or point is the non-Jewish person?
Actually, the privilege and the moral duty to do so. Because if the Jew has to do it regarding the universal moral duties as human beings of the non-Jews, then even more so the non-Jew. For himself, that is certainly the foundation of sharing the universal moral system. And I emphasize the word system because it's not just a matter of monotheistic beliefs and of the heart, but a practical system that has to do with the word, sensitivity. Sensitivity towards living beings, sensitivity towards the property of others, towards the body of others, towards the gender of others, towards society as a whole. So surely it is a moral duty for each of us to do it, to help and facilitate this knowledge. And that's where it starts and that's where it ends. Now, not being a professional in the art of spreading the monotheism of the Torah. That should be left to the professionals, rabbis, experts with experience, or those who are not agile, who for years or decades have been trained and initiated in this matter. But each one of these levels can help. But it's also important that the same system of proselytism and missionary work used in literature, none of those tools or formats work for monotheism. Why do I say this? Because most people are tempted to buy any book like Torah Temet or books that are suitable. When they begin, they'll open the Bible, read, and start proselytizing with their opinions. That's classic in literature. So are we talking about letting ourselves be helped by those Jewish institutions or not agile ones that have experience in the subject to know how to make things easier? Along with this, there are some books that we will show later, which you can get and start studying to share those ideas. Yes, they help, but mainly the missionary approach, that needs to be eliminated. Otherwise, look, I learned this, it works for me. Let's see, what do you think? Along with that, an example I want to bring up regarding non-agile practices is the example of tour buses. In any big city, there are tour buses that always follow the same route. And anyone can get on that bus at any of the classic tourist stops. And in the end, it doesn't matter where you get on, you'll end up in the same place. Everyone will take the same tour, no matter where they start. My suggestion is to start where it's easiest, not where there will be resistance, criticism, or family issues. Start with what's easiest. So common sense won't put up any resistance. For example, the concept of tzedakah, of active solidarity, having a tzedakah box in every house for money, and distributing it to community kitchens, hospitals, or schools in their city. Who would oppose this? Anyone who does is making a statement, and that's law, not just ethics. Acquiring a copy of the Constitution, the national Constitution, and the regulations of the laws of each country, that's a duty. It's not just about high-level ethics or following the law, but ethics in practical, concrete matters. In the same way, people who are sensitive should join animal protection organizations and advocate for this. That's also law, not just ethics. I mean, why do we necessarily have to start with the verses that are contradictory and begin that whole classic rant about experiences? That the person came, surely they reach natural monotheism after many cycles, but they have to break that, unlearn, and start to understand that this is a universal moral system, which has to do with practice, not just beliefs. It aims to change reality, and there are many ways to do so.
Rob, you were saying something interesting. I was actually studying this with my father today. I found a manuscript, a print from the early 1700s, where Anderson, who was one of the founders of Freemasonry, he wrote something similar to what you're saying, and he wrote the word Noahide in English. We're talking about a very old source, and he also starts from this point here. In this universal idea, there are no religions. Even the Constitution should be considered as a valid source of knowledge. That really connects with your point, Rob. Very interesting. So what books would you really recommend for this? How to get familiar? Because you say that the non-Jew who comes many times comes precisely because he broke away from the pattern of idolatry. So they come out of there, they flourish, and that's why it's natural really to start there. But then what other alternative, Rob? Where else? Which one is common? What is this other analogy? A bus stop where the non-Jew could start. So
There is a book that I am going to recommend, and also study channels and groups as well. But if you were to ask me, is there just one book that I would buy? During a year of no ageism, no more than one, which one would I buy and which one would I study for myself and then share? Is this one, The 7 Paths of Love, Life, Purpose, and Serenity by the Spaniard. It is, so far as I understand, the book that summarizes in a very didactic way, but also very modern and profound. It covers the main ideas of what the non-magical pact is. It's been available in Spanish for about a year, though the book, written by Rabbi Dober Pinson, a renowned United States mystic and rabbi, is 10 years old. Now there's a new edition available in all languages. If I could buy only one, this is the most accessible and understandable book for everyone. And everyone will find something that resonates with them. It even has practical exercises, spiritual exercises as well. So this is the book. Along with this, what I would suggest is that people, when they start to discover monotheism, think that they're alone in the world and that it's only happening to them. It's a phenomenon, this drawing closer to the source that Isaiah and Jeremiah prophesied, and now it's happening to millions in our generation. So for collective issues, are there collective solutions? Why be individual? Why try to reinvent the wheel? The idea is to join non-rigid groups of Jewish institutions or non-rigid institutions that have been developing in this area for decades. And there you will have all the guidance, the approach, the facilitators, the didactic tools on one hand, and also the encouragement, the spirit, and the sense of belonging. To prevent someone from feeling stuck, since they may think this only happens to me, when actually it happens to everyone. And the vast majority, at least on this side of the West, who approach the world of the Torah, come with the same experiences and the same obstacles and challenges. So there's already a whole structure, a framework for how to overcome the initial difficulties, how to guide and support during that process. Like Abraham, he went through a process from age 3 to 40, discovering and eventually fully embracing monotheism before spreading it. Each person has their own timing. Consequently, if you yourself have a certain amount of time, the other person also has their own timing. And trust in the ideas that authentic ideas will displace erroneous ideas. And each person has their freedom of choice, respecting the level of hippolog, and each one has a level of closeness and a certain amount of time. Therefore, our vision begins and also ends with the freedom of choice of others. Not wanting to insist, not wanting to envision, that's a mistake. There's no need to sell it. It sells itself. Expose or help those who know how to do it, and connect people who are interested with those who know how to do it. This is one of the pillars of evangelical outreach.
very interesting. About a year ago, a very critical book came out on purpose about the Noahide movement, Rachel Feldman, which on one hand, she makes this kind of criticism. Overall, it's very hostile toward the Noahide movement, but it's very compassionate toward people who want this connection with Judaism but feel alone. And that's where the paradox lies. Precisely, the movement is what comes to solve that. So as you just explained, that's why this thesis criticizing the Noahide movement would fail.
The virtue is that it's precisely a movement. The movement involves all kinds of tensions, all kinds of authorities that are exchanged in dialogue, and it's exactly in line with the Noahide principle of unity. In diversity, there must be diversity. And whenever there is diversity, there are tensions and struggles. It's natural for it to be that way, but it's not a mistake for it to be that way. It's the intended effect of the Torah, the unity of diversity. So the movement does exactly that. There are advances, setbacks, different perspectives, and it's very good that it's that way.
Of course, nobody expects it to be a monolithic religion all over the planet. I don't know any Jew who suggested that. There aren't any.
People often see it as a religion, which is the main mistake. It's not classified as a religion, it's classified as a universal moral movement of ideas and practices for all human beings. Obviously, there's no comparison to this because any ideology or any religion or any philosophy is nourished by a specific field. And it also presents dichotomies. This is something, a totally revolutionary message, applicable to every person, timeless, at every moment, in every place, on every continent, without any kind of differences. Every human being applies to the Rainbow Covenant within the educational tools. You don't necessarily have to start with the Torah, the Pentateuch, and the prophets. If we're talking about teenagers and children, I would give them this. This is nothing more than a prism obviously, that refracts and diffuses light into the colors of the rainbow, and start to explain the idea of the rainbow with its diversity, with each of its values, through a prism. And so different teaching tools that can be applied to teenagers, adults. It's not necessarily about showing a verse or pointing out contradictions or what should be applied. Get out of that, unmask yourself from that, break away from that, and start with something completely new.
As a curious fact about my position as an engineer, that one of the great physicists who talked about the subject of the prism was Isaac Newton, who also wrote extensively about the non-acidic laws, just as a curious fact, which is also present. And the idea that the rainbow represents that is not new either. It's not like Ralph Graves is making it up. Very ancient texts, Jewish ones say it. We
who come from the mystical side. Fire also has 7 colors, the fire that burns and the fire that gives light, and also a bonfire and a gathering around the bonfire with the fire shown. It's also a didactic element in that regard. Obviously, I can't expect someone from the plains to know all this, but they should consult with those who do know how to do it. And to join this and take on the moral and spiritual duty to be able to enlighten, in fact. And God promised Abraham that his seed, the spiritual children of Abraham, not just the people of Israel. Since Abraham was the father of a multitude of monotheistic nations, the souls that Abraham made in Haran were those he converted to monotheism. He helped them discover their innate monotheism. Consequently, just like the stars, besides shining in the darkness of the night, have the function of guiding one during the night. If you don't know directions, you're lost in the desert. By looking at the stars like the 3 Marys, you can orient yourself and know where to go. In the same way, each person has enough moral and spiritual strength to help another, to find their spiritual direction, especially in a generation where there is so much confusion, so much crisis of values and identity, and so much spiritual distraction. Those who approach the Torah see different options, many of them with bad intentions, many of them well-intentioned, but mistaken. So can each person serve as a spiritual star for their fellow man?
Yes, and Rafi, maybe this is for another talk one of these days. It's just that non-Agita leaders really have it tough. And that's a reflection that's being written about this. And maybe for you, it's not new, but the Jewish leader historically is considered a leader because he knows a lot. So since he knows a lot, we know he's a leader because we value knowledge in other religions or in other systems. It's the charismatic one who doesn't necessarily have to know a lot, but since he has charisma, then isn't the leader somewhere between these two worlds where there are people who follow because of charisma? Doesn't the non-rigid leader also need to know what the sages of Israel teach? So it's something very broad, and I do notice this, let's say, tension that they have to face, but I don't know if you want to say a word about it, but in general, maybe it's for another talk.
And besides that, a third fundamental element, which is called in Hebrew, fear of heaven or strict conduct. Under the Noahide code, you cannot preach what you do not practice. Without a doubt, we will talk about that in another talk. How should the formation of the Noahide leader be, both in study and in practice? How can he transform his life to become a role model? And the model and the example are the best tools to spread. It's like a perfume, it embraces everyone, and this is valid for every person. Even people without great wisdom or charisma can reach others by being a model and example.
Of course, and that's something Raf also really agrees with. And you mentioned it kind of between the lines that the problems of the non-Agita are not only that. Well, I want everyone to be monotheistic. I'm going to start handing out flyers, but it's at the family level. Like I'm going to argue with my wife who isn't non-Agita. And what about our children? Will we raise them with her religion or monotheism? And these micro-proselytisms are reflected in so many spaces. That's why I told you. I'll put social media links in the description so you can contact Raf Groisman, who helped. Not to sound offensive, on the contrary. In Judaism, gray hair is a symbol of something good. Raf Groisman has as much experience with Noahides as I have years on this earth, so you can contact him using this information.
Of course, and our effort also joins different efforts from different parts of the world, from rabbis who have already spent decades spreading the Noahide message. Experience does its part, and so does the track record. So we invite everyone to join the great Noahide movements that exist in the world in every language, and also to the content that has already been developed. We already have more than 40 years in general of the Jewish people actively spreading the Noahide message. There is a lot of experience. And now people receive content in books and in much more developed videos, and also systems and methods of dissemination. Let's make the most of this golden age of Noahide outreach by getting involved as much as we can. Also, as we said before, the good idea replaces the bad idea, so trust in ideas, because with ideas you can achieve things.
Yes, and to finish what you were saying, I definitely remembered this book. Rolf Schulman gave it to me. You might know it. It discusses this, and the introduction is similar about how Jews, since we're not proselytizers, it seems like our role doesn't make sense. But precisely, he says, he repeats it over and over again, it's for the public. It's like a compilation of when the rebel Uvavitch spoke about the Noahide laws, and he spoke many times, as you can see, but it seems to me this is only part of what I mentioned so often, but he emphasized a lot that it's true we're not proselytizers except when it comes to the Noahide topic, and he quotes Tosafot and Rambam. And so it's like, I don't want to say that I'm a proselytizer, but objectively, I am very interested in the world being monotheistic if I want this world to be better. So I just wanted to leave that personal bomb at the end. And well, if you want to say any message to close.
Of course. We were promised in the Torah, all the prophets and all Israel's servants, especially Maimonides, specifically in the law of non-Jewish diffusion, that everyone who adheres to this is surely guaranteed a reward in this world and in the world to come, with joy, with prosperous well-being, with full spirituality, with transcendence in this world. He will take part in the era of the Mashiach. He will take part in the era of the resurrection, in the world as well, because it impacts the world. It impacts the world and changes it for the better. And with this, all the rewards in this world and in the world to come are deserved. And the person will feel whole, that he is doing the right thing, that it is nothing more and nothing less than doing the right thing.
Thanks, RAPH, and to everyone watching. Feel free to contact RAPH using the info in the description. Greetings to all.
Thank you very much, Jacob, and to all the abundant audience of Jewish philosophy. Keep moving forward in study and practice with joy, with abundance, and with smiles. Amen.
Amen.